Welcome to the Gulf Intelligence Daily Energy Markets live video podcast on Friday, the 5th of May. Brent crude has had another miserable week, his worst run in years, according to Bloomberg today. Now bouncing around $72. That's 10% down over the past 5 days or so, and its third consecutive week of decline. What is going on? We've seen interest rate rises from the Fed and the Europeans, more banking worries in the USA. Maybe the mini crisis of March was not so mini after all. Pacific Western Bank is being talked about today as possibly the next target or victim. It's becoming pretty clear that Russia has not followed through on its its 500,000 barrel cut that it promised in March. And on top of all that, we're seeing tanker hijackings in the Gulf, explosions in the Far East, and drone attacks on the Kremlin. So to make some sense of all that, I've got three people with me who can do just that. Let me introduce Tony Quinn, operating partner of ProStar Capital and CEO of Tank Bank International over there in Singapore. Welcome back, Tony. Welcome back to Gulmira Razayeva. I hope I pronounced you properly, Gulmira. Yeah. Founder and managing director of Eurasia Analytics. She is a native of Azerbaijan, but are you in London currently, Gulmira? You're in London. Okay, but currently in London. And also welcome again to Daniel Ramat, senior energy security consultant in Tehran. Good to see you, Dan.
My pleasure.
Mine too. All three of you have areas of specialism that we'll dig down into later. But first, let me get your views on the global oil market. As I said in the beginning, what is going on? Gulmira, how do you see it? Brent is now trading around or below where it was before the surprise cuts at the beginning of April. Why? Why, in your view, is that?
Well, I think there are a few factors that affect the Brent prices, and we see how Russia is actually drastically increasing its oil export. If you look at the some data or statistics, of oil and oil export from Russia, you can see that in last 2 months, March and April, Russia increased oil export to mainly China and India, but also some other countries. Turkey a little bit increased Russian imports in April. So obviously, because of the price cap, Russia is trying to make as much money as it can and trying to sell more. So refineries in India and China, they're trying to benefit from the situation and importing from Russia like there is no tomorrow, as much as they can at the moment. This a little bit affects the prices as well, but also, I think more countries are trying to export more from the region. For instance, the region that I'm looking into, it's Caspian region, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan. Despite that, there are some technical difficulties for Kazakhstan to export more oil, but I see that these countries trying also to increase oil export via alternative routes. I think we will come to that later.
Yes, we will, indeed.
Yeah, via Caspian and other.
But let me ask you, Gulmira. So, in your view, these supply issues, increased Russian oil, I guess we'd also say increased Iranian oil. I will ask Dan about that. Are these factors more important than the other worries that we've heard about? The Fed rate increases, recession fears. Worries about Chinese demand. How do you allocate the responsibility for the decline amongst those factors?
Chinese demand is recovering, and China is starting importing more and more, especially again last 2 months. If you look at the data from March and April, then definitely imports are increasing. So I think this will affect prices in shorter term perspective. Prices will increase, but definitely China plays a very important role here, and the Chinese recovery, especially industry recovery, a lot of oil imports comes from Chinese industries and refineries. So again, they started importing a lot from Russia, more than anywhere else. And Russia here competing with Saudi Arabia in that region, in Asia, Southeast Asia. So this definitely plays a role, and of course the factors that you mentioned also have its effect on prices. But again, my opinion is that oil prices will be increasing in short-term perspective.
Okay, we'll talk about that too later. Tony, over there in Singapore, you have a good 10,000 feet view of global storage and inventories. Is it simply a case of there being enough oil to go around at the moment, or even too much? I read this morning that there's a flotilla of tankers on their way to China, according to reports today. And Aramco is cutting Asian prices for the first time in a while. What do you read into all that? And also tell us a bit, what about Chinese demand prospects? Tony, have we lost you?
I haven't been around for about a year, but I'm back.
Okay.
So firstly, I think in terms of, sorry, my screen just died for some reason. Let's put this back on. There we go. Something updated. Right.
You gremlins over there.
Sorry, you can hear me anyway, so that's the main thing.
Yeah,
I'll just talk to my
we can see you too. Yeah,
that's good. That's good for you, and probably not good for anyone else. But anyway, so look, the first thing in terms of the storage perspective, I run a number of terminals around the world, from the Caribbean across to Fujairah, and obviously very close in the Singapore region here. I'm based here. I mean, the first thing is, if you look at that last comment about the ships going to China, that's really no difference. I mean, that's always been happening. That's been happening for a long, long time. We're going back 15 years. The main movement from Venezuela was always China, and it still is today. Our large terminal in the Caribbean was actually the hub for PDVSA up until the Trump decisions on sanctions. A couple of 3 years ago now, and now with Chevron taking over those positions in the US and looking after, if you like, the Venezuela movements, we're seeing that coming back. They're looking at bulking up. Everyone's looking at sending VLCCs across. Not just to China, but also to India. People like Reliance are now sort of building, at least a tanker, a VL a week now, going over to Jamnagar. So the movement has always been Asia. That's always been the big push. When it comes to places like...
but Tony, I think the point behind the Bloomberg story this morning was that this was an unusually large raft of boats, if you like, that was heading to China.
So they've got a number of things they're filling. Obviously, one is strategic stock. The other thing is, of course, the crude price is down, so they're going to go for it. Like this, they're going to fill up every tank they have. And there's more tankage. There's actually more tankage in China than there is basically in the rest of the world. I mean, they've got an awful lot of storage in terms of strategic, but also operational storage and trading storage. So most of the movements will come through and past Singapore sometimes, and then straight into Shanghai, Ningbo, Guangzhou, all those sort of places where the strategic farms are. So that's always been a consistent movement. And when it comes to oil price, just picking up on Gulmira's comment, I mean, I'm an old oil guy. I've been doing this 44 years, and I sort of see the price of oil balanced around about 40 to 50. I think we had an exacerbation at the beginning. Well, actually, it was before the Russian-Ukraine conflict. But actually, it was inflated really by investors in and out of the oil business. It's always those guys that seem to push the prices all over the place, rather than the demand. Demand and cuts do make a difference, but it's usually corrected within a week or so. So sitting at a $70 oil, and maybe 60 in terms of WTI, I sort of see that as a balancing. I see that, in my view, is that's sort of where it should be. We may even see a mini contango coming back into the market. But I think in general, The flow to China, I don't think that's particularly strange given the pricing at the moment.
Okay, 70 to 60, that might very well be the kind of natural level, but I don't think that that's enough for Saudi Arabia or for Russia at the moment either. But, let's, given the big macroeconomic factors that they have to deal with, expenditure on war and expenditure on huge projects in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. But let me go to Dan, because Iran has been producing and exporting much more crude lately. Dan, 3 million barrels a day, I read from the Iranian oil minister today. So is Iran now a serious factor again in global oil markets? Is it one of the reasons that we've seen the price weaknesses of late?
And there are several issues regarding Iran we need to consider. The first one is Iran's crude oil is just what Iran delivers to the market. In December, Iran almost exported about 800,000 barrels of refined products to the market. Also, last year, Iran sold something about $29 billion of petrochemical products. And in addition to that, something about 1.3 million barrels of crude oil and gas condensate Iran is sending to the markets. Please consider, remember last year, this time we were speaking about Iran's floating reserves in Asia, which was about 100 million barrels. Right now, there is almost nothing left of that. Right. So you see, Iran has delivered a very huge amount of oil to the markets last year, especially within the last 6 months, and Iran is increasing production, and also has recently opened a new part of Abadan refinery, and is going to continue opening more refineries and more capacities to deliver more refined products to the market. I personally believe that Iran has the capacity to increase something about 500,000 barrels to its production this year. According to FGE, they believe that Iran is going to increase its production by 400,000 barrels this year by the end of December. So Iran is a factor, but we should be aware that Iran's sole real market, as I will say, Iran's sole real market is China. And Iran has to compete with Russians, Venezuelans, and others for the so-called teapots, not the major refineries, because it's a very dangerous business for them to buy Iranian crude. So competing for the teapots is something very hard for Iran. 95% of Iranian oil goes to Shandong only, not to the other ports. So it's a very complicated business for Iran. Most of Iranian oil either directly goes to China or goes to Malaysia, and then through Malaysia is transferred to China. So the business, actually marketing Iranian oil is a problem. So Iran has to offer very fantastic discounts. Right, and considering the cost and considering the declining prices, the business is getting less and less fruitful for Iranian oil company.
Okay, but Dan, let me clarify one point. You said that the 100 million barrels of floating oil has now gone.
Most of that.
Yeah,
Iran sold, because of the high level of uncertainty in the market, and actually a sort of backwardation in the market where the future contracts are cheaper than the spot prices. Iran, during the last 3 months, decided to sell most of its oil with remarkable discounts. So right. Because it was not making sense to keep that oil floating because the prices were getting weaker and weaker. So you'd better to sell your oil with a discount instead of keeping that floating, accepting the risks, and also spending the money for keeping that floating. So okay. Iran sold most of its oil, and there is almost no gas condensate floating right now.
Okay, Dan, let me stay with you because I want to ask you about tankers. Iran's taken another tanker in the Gulf, and this looks rather more serious than the seizure last week, I think. I read that a dozen IRGC boats swarmed the tanker, forced it into Iranian waters. Why is this happening now?
Everybody knows about the first tanker, and that was a retaliation to the U.S. seizure of Iranian one and delivering that to the U.S.
Yeah.
But the second one is a mystery. Honestly, there are many rumors. There are many hypotheses about this. People are saying that maybe this was a sort of signal to the states that because the United States did not respond to the first one appropriately, and this was another signal that if you want to continue making trouble for my tankers, I'm just going to make problems for everybody here. But since the tanker was empty and it was coming from Dubai going to Fujairah, and the owner was a Hong Kong-based company and the operator was a Greek, it has nothing to do with the states. Why the hell the United States should respond to such an action, which has nothing to do with that? And I think threatening the Hong Kong companies would somehow make some level of anger in Beijing, because it's somehow related to their business here.
Okay. The Chinese angle to it.
But it could also be, there are two other theories. One of them is a sort of conspiracy theory made by tanker trackers. They believe the whole story is in a stage one, and this is actually orchestrated fake seizure, because the tanker itself was previously involved in exporting Iranian oil, what they call it, smuggling Iranian oil anyway. So tanker trackers believes that it is a staged, actually pre-orchestrated issue for misleading the Americans or the others.
False flag.
There is another possibility.
It's obviously a breaking story, isn't it? Gulmira, let me go back to you. You're an expert on energy in the Caucasus and Azerbaijan in particular. It seems to me that Baku is in an interesting position at the moment because it's offered to significantly increase gas supplies to Europe to help replace Russian gas, but it wants more clarity on the size and duration of those orders. What's the latest there? Is there any sign of deals being done with the Europeans? We can't hear you.
Apologies. Yeah, there are definitely more interest coming from the European countries. Azerbaijan is continuing signing either MOU or some partnership contracts and some official documents with the European potential buyers, countries, President visiting those countries or they visiting Baku. So definitely there is a great interest. And today, about 9 or 10 countries showed their strong interest to buy gas from Azerbaijan. And I think by 2027, Azerbaijan will be able to double its export. Currently, the country is exporting 10 BCMA, but by 2027, it will be able to double this volume of export to Europe. The countries that want to buy gas from Azerbaijan or are currently buying gas, previously they were almost entirely, some of them, 90-95% were dependent on just one supplier, Russian Gazprom. And for them, it's vital, to find alternative gas supply from countries like Azerbaijan, because, this country has already have in place multi-billion infrastructure, gas via alternative routes and alternative sources. So, these countries already replaced most of the Russian gas via LNG and Azerbaijani gas. But, if Azerbaijan manages to, first of all, increase supplies to those countries or enter new country markets, then, these countries can secure their supply security for longer term perspective. Obviously, the country has its own, conditions, because Azerbaijan needs to secure the market.
They want long-term contracts.
Yeah, that's why.
At prices.
Yeah, otherwise, it will not be possible to convince the investors and shareholders, because it's not only Azerbaijan that owns the fields, and there are, several IOCs that are shareholders. So you have to convince them to go ahead with final investment decision.
Okay. Gulmira, let me also ask you a rather sort of broader question about Azerbaijan, because if Azerbaijan jumps in to, fill the Russian gap in Europe, my question is, does it risk alienating Russia further? Is Azerbaijan worried at all about what Russia might do to Azerbaijan in the wake of the Ukraine war, however that turns out?
Well, I don't think
about the Russians.
Yeah, I don't think that the official Baku is worried about that, or has been worried ever since it started to exporting oil first in 2006 and then natural gas later. It seems that Azerbaijan is probably the only FSU country at the moment that is independently pursuing its energy policies, because it managed to untap the Caspian resources and start exporting gas to westward to Turkey and the European countries. The same with the oil, actually, back many years ago. So never been worried about that. But obviously you have to, also give some stakes to Russia as well. Russian Lukoil has some minor stakes in some fields in Azerbaijan. That was, given when decision on, PSA was taken, PSA was signed. So, but to be worried about the outcome of the war and consequences of that, I don't think that Baku is much worried about that.
Okay. Tony, it strikes me from reading that Singapore is also treading quite a narrow political tightrope, isn't it? Because it's seeking to attract Chinese wealth and Chinese investment, and is being successful at that. But it's also increasing its military and security ties with the US. How does that pan out?
Well, Singapore is an interesting country. I've lived here for quite a few years, and it's an amazing sort of paradox, really, in terms of its relationship with both the US and China. The most important thing is both of them keep most of their money here, so that sort of gives it a little bit of security issue, I suppose, around that. But more importantly, we are basically 80% Chinese country. So, our population is mainly Chinese. The wealth taxes, which you might be referring to, that came in last week, was increasing second property tax to 65% for foreign investment. So 65% of your purchase price on your probably very expensive $20 million condo here is now 65% that you've got to pay on top as a tax. So that's going to detract people. But we've seen this in Singapore for the last few years, and particularly during the COVID time, where a lot of companies left because you couldn't operate here. They closed all the borders and so on. It made things very difficult. So actually, I see that the landscape is changing here a lot.
Right.
And you see, there's much more, as there should be, impetus on, making sure that the kids leave university here and they don't leave, which is predominantly what used to happen, to try and encourage jobs in the city state. But yeah, you're right. Then the tightrope that you mentioned, of course, is that we reflect our position with that of other states that are in the middle of potential conflict zones, like Taiwan, for instance. And they see a similarity between, if there would be an incursion into Taiwan, that something like that could happen here.
Right.
We're sitting around, Indonesia, Malaysia, all around us here. So anything could happen like that. However, to defend the Chinese actions, I don't think they're actually a conflict country. They don't do that. You will never see in history they did that. They might do it internally, but not externally. And actually, where I would side on their side, I would go that the Americans seem to be the ones that poke the stick and prompt the action. And look how many times that's happened and failed over the last few years.
Right.
So, it's a very interesting paradox here.
Yeah,
but we have both countries very, very involved in this country. All the major banks, as you know, most of them moved from Switzerland to here a long time ago. So the money is all here. You know, the big companies are all here. The trading entities that are trading oil around the Gulf are all here. You know, so everyone is sitting here. So there's sort of it's a melting pot, but you just don't know where it's going to go.
Right. Interesting. Can we pull up the survey question, please? Because this relates to Russia and oil supply, as we were discussing earlier. In view of the falling price of crude and Russia's failure to deliver on its promised cuts, OPEC Plus has no option but to cut further at its June the 4th ministerial meeting, if not before. And that's a straightforward single choice. Do you agree with that statement, or do you disagree with that statement? And we'll come back to that when we have a result and talk a little bit more about it. But as I have on the show an Iranian and an Azeri, I would just like to, you know, this is another area of potential conflict, isn't it? There have been increased tensions around that border in southern Azerbaijan, northern Iran. Gulmira, how do you see it from an Azeri point of view? You know, that maybe that could be the second front, if you like, in the case of some, you know, outbreak of hostility with Russia. Would that be the second front? Are you worried about that? You're mute again. You're mute.
Sorry. Do you mean hostilities between Azerbaijan and Russia, or Azerbaijan and Iran?
Azerbaijan and Iran.
Yeah, unfortunately, as of today, we have a worst diplomatic relationship that we ever had. There have been a lot of hostile rhetorics between two countries, again, that we never had before. But it seems
ambassador been withdrawn, hasn't it? The Azeri ambassador been withdrawn.
Yeah. After the terror attack on the embassy of Azerbaijan in Iran, you know, as a result, one was died. Another one was injured, and I think the main, you know, dissatisfaction of Azerbaijan and concern of Azerbaijan is that Iran doesn't want to conduct a fair investigation of the event. But anyway, this not only involved, this is just the consequences. It's a few events that came after the liberalization of the occupied territories of Azerbaijan, and that also was the land, you know, on the border with Iran, and Iran. Yeah. You know, announced that will not tolerate any change of borders, but there is no change of borders, just, you know, lands were liberated from the occupation. So I think if you look at the, you know, rhetorics and events of last few days or weeks, then I think things are getting a little bit better. You know, Iran, so Iran's rhetoric has changed now. There is some diplomatic events happening. I think the both sides are trying to somehow, you know, change the situation, and sooner or later this may happen. But again, there's a very complicated geopolitical development involved, because you know, region has been changed a lot after the Second Karabakh War, and there are interests of many countries now, major powers, including Iran, in that region in South Caucasus, and you know, I think many things will also depend on the outcome of the war in Ukraine. But this geopolitical development is very complicated, and it's not hard to explain in just few sentences.
I get it. Yeah, Dan, it's hard to explain, I know, but give me a quick view from Tehran, if you could, on the same question.
Frank, you know that I personally have strong ties with Azerbaijan, and I really know that what are the concerns of the Baku, of the Azerbaijani people, and also the Azerbaijani government regarding Iran's actually geopolitical activities here, there, and regarding the attack on the embassy. I'm not an expert in terrorist issues to name it, whether it was a terrorist attack or not. But anyway, I believe that both sides are suffering from a deep sort of misunderstanding and also contrast of interests because of several decades Iran's lack of real activity in Caucasus region, because Iran has always been considering the Caucasus region as a sort of the Russians area of influence. So Iran didn't dare to enter there. Instead, many other countries, including Turkey, other countries, followed their interest there. So Iran lacks the sort of soft power in Azerbaijan. That's why the Iranians are now supporting or have been supporting some religious groups which are not necessarily directly linked to the core of the power in this country. But Iran has its own concerns about the Azerbaijan's approaches towards actually linking its territory to Nakhchivan and also to Turkey. Naming a part of Iran as South Azerbaijan, actually renaming a part of Iran, is a sort of aggressive action made by Baku, which Iran considers as a sort of territorial claim. Such territorial claims in Iran as a big country makes huge anger in public. I think we, of course, as Gulmira said, there are new diplomatic developments between the two nations, and I hope that will result in a better relations. We have millions, tens of millions of Azerbaijani ethnics here, which have been living together with Persians for thousands of years. So I think the debate, that the ground for friendship between the two nations is available. But in terms of energy cooperation, it would somehow be impossible.
Sorry, Dan, we'll have to stop it there because I do apologize. I should have left more time for this, given the expert view of both of you and the complicated nature
it's too complicated to speak in just a few minutes.
Absolutely, it is. Sorry, I misjudged that. Let me go back to the survey results, which is more or less too close to call. 55% think that there will be no increase in June or before. 45% think that OPEC Plus will have no other choice. Tony, final word to you. How did you vote there?
Actually, I said no, they wouldn't. And I think basically, you cut and you start increasing the prices, you're just going to make profit for everyone, but it doesn't do anything to the market. The traders make some money, but that's it. It'll come back again. So I think they won't do anything at this point.
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. Well, look, the three of you, thank you very much indeed. Gulmira, Danielle, Tony. I think we need a special episode on Azerbaijan-Iranian relations and the implications for the energy industry. But thank you very much indeed for your time, and look forward to seeing you again soon, I hope. Next week, maybe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Güle güle Gülmüle.
Güle güle, sağ ol.
خوشحال oldum.